All right, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Which we might be changing the name.
It's been discussed.
Andy just aptly inspired by the moment said we should call this the Take Two podcast because almost every time you see us, we're on at least take two.
At least, yeah. Usually not more than take two,
yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, usually one erroneous start.
Right.
Which is not, it's always technologically related. We're great right from the start.
We're ready to go at all times. We're just ready to go.
Yeah, something that the technology just always wants to try to hamper us. But you know what? I get it. You can't have everything. You can't have the talent, the looks, and the technology.
Something has to go wrong. And it obviously hasn't been our looks or our talent. So.
Obviously. Yeah, that is consistent.
Yeah.
I think we can at least say.
If nothing else, consistent. And we're also back after learning that our podcast is haunted.
Yeah.
From our horror movie episode where
true.
the lights... And I do want to say for the record, because I did have a few people ask me if that was like staged. That was not staged.
No.
That legitimately happened, and our reactions were real, and it was in real time. And we just kind of had that pause, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, that was... and I think people know, like, we joke about the issues we have with technology. We don't usually have as many issues as we had on that one. It just felt like a haunted episode. Like, everything that could go wrong kind of went wrong. And
then the lights just inexplicably flickered during the podcast. So
I guess the thing that didn't go wrong was, thankfully, it continued to record, and we were able to catch that moment.
It seems like it probably shouldn't have in some way. It's like something should have shut down at some point, but
yeah, so we, we're glad that we were still able to produce that episode and get it out there and let people enjoy it.
Even with interference from ghosts.
Or
spirits.
Or the church leprechaun, whatever it was.
We don't know. Yeah.
Leprechaun in the church.
Yeah, leprechaun in the church.
Well, today we are going to continue what's become sort of a series for us. We've drafted 80s action movies. We've drafted 90s action movies.
We're into the 2000s.
So we're continuing to the 2000s. It's what's known as the aughts.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot of people don't know that.
Right.
I don't know. I don't feel smart for knowing that. I don't know
where
I heard.
I probably heard it in the context of movies before. That's why I know it.
But yeah, the aughts are the 2000s, the 2000 through 2009.
Yep.
Before you get to the 10s and 20s, that's what those are called, the aughts. And so we're going to be talking about action movies now. Some preamble with this. We talked about in the 80s, what a golden era of action movies.
Yes.
We talked about in the 90s, what a surprising amount of good action movies that followed. The aughts, I think, are where we're beginning to feel that, like, we're out of that golden era.
Oh, we are.
For sure.
Yeah. I have just as long as list of action movies in the aughts that I didn't like. that I did like.
I think ultimately what's going to happen is I'm going to have a list of 5 movies that I really like, and I'm glad I selected. But they don't feel like action movies in the way that the 80s action movies feel like action movies. They all feel like movies that are like, these are movies that, they have action in them, so I guess they're action movies. They don't feel like Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme action movies.
That was my biggest thing in making my list, is that it's very clear in the 2000s that the Stallone, Schwarzenegger era is over, unfortunately. But I'm the same. I have some on my list that kind of blur the lines a little bit. But I want to tell you, we haven't talked about this at all. I purposely, I don't know if you did the same, I left superhero movies off of my list.
I did. Well, I left one on there.
Did you? I just left them off.
And I was uncertain if I should or shouldn't. And honestly, I put it low on my list because I figured if it was taken, you would take it very high.
I just left them off because otherwise I just felt like I was going to be just talking about superheroes.
And you know
the
what?
whole time.
I'll tell you what. I'll agree to that. The movie that I'm talking about is The Dark Knight. And the only reason that I said maybe that can blur is because, as we talked about before, it's the most grounded superhero movie that kind of works almost just as a regular action movie that happens to have a dressed up crime fighter.
It does. I just felt like if I opened that door, then I had to invite all the superhero movies in. You know, your Spider-Mans. There's a lot of X-Men movies in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So I just left them all off.
I also left those out. Another one that I will just go ahead and say that I left out because, again, amidst all these ones that blur the lines, this one would have just been pushing too hard, is Inglourious Bastards. I was like, it's just, there's some action in it, but it's just, I would never look at that and go, it's an action movie.
It's talky.
Yeah,
if that's a word, talky.
Yeah, so there's not a Tarantino representation, and I feel like Tarantino's done movies that I guess could be considered action movies, but I usually just don't.
So I do have a Tarantino on my list,
okay.
But I did leave that one off.
Okay,
yep.
All right, fair enough. Well,
so we've established that there's just no rules for this. It's just a free for all.
It is pretty free for all. Like I said, there's some of mine that I'm like, if we were like a really competitive duo on this, maybe like I'd be worried, like, is he gonna call me out on that and be like, not quite action movie? I don't think so. I think all these do qualify, but like I said, they're just not. This is again, I think the beginning of a lot of the genre blurring.
It is
where there's rarely ever any just a straightforward, this is action. It's like, this is sort of an action drama, or this is an, I guess a lot of mine that I'm looking at are kind of action dramas or action sci-fi.
Action sci-fi I found popping up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird how just the straight action movies seem to go away for the most part. There's a couple on here that I think kind of dipped back into that. But yeah, it really went away. Like when the 80s, just that was its own genre.
Yeah, a very successful one.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't even bring a coin.
What's your? I'm about to say, if we're gonna do the back and forth, it is your turn.
I guess I will take it.
I accept that it is your turn.
And I will go with my first pick. Probably not gonna be too surprising because I've referenced this movie before and really loving it, and that is Collateral.
Yeah,
the Michael Mann movie with Jamie Foxx, Tom Cruise. Again, it is an action movie, but it is
almost like a prestige action movie.
Yeah, it's an action drama. It's very it's definitely not that Stallone Schwarzenegger one liner like shoot a guy and it gets very grounded, kind of gritty. It's
like an action movie where you felt like they could have been nominated for Oscars.
Yeah. And in fact, I think they should have.
I think Cruise definitely should have.
And that was honestly, it's the movie that made me grow to really respect Jamie Foxx as an actor.
Yeah,
because I know him as like kind of a comedy guy.
He was a comedian.
And when he was in that movie, I was like, Cruise is really good, but look at Jamie Foxx just holding his own in all these scenes. Like I don't feel like he's struggling to hold his own either. It's not like he's holding on for dear life. He's going toe to toe.
Just doing just fine.
Cruise.
Such a good character. He's so believable as a cab driver. He's so good in that movie. That movie was on, maybe still is on Netflix. But I just remember like 2 months ago, I watched it like 3 times. And over the course of like 2 weeks, kind of in segments, and not just, but that's such a good movie.
I feel like it was also early into like Tom Cruise gets really into like doing all his stuff. I remember seeing behind the scenes of like he really trained on combat and gun handling, and he's doing all the like all the stuff right with the guns and things like that. And that was, like I said, early Tom Cruise, and still I think to this day it's the only villain that Tom Cruise has played.
I think so,
or at least like straight forward villain.
Probably is it the only time he's ever died on screen?
I think we talked about this. I think it might be.
I think we did talk about this during our very first episode, Mission Impossible. I think it might be. I'd have to fact check myself, but if it's not, it's one of the very, very few. Yeah. The fact that like we can't. We can't. Nothing jumps to mind. Yeah. So my first pick. There we go. That's a great Collateral. Pick. Who do you like more in that movie, Cruise or Fox? Man, it really is a pick your poison. Cruise gets kind of the flashier role, and he's the bigger star. Mm-hmm. I think I like Jamie Foxx's more because of what a surprise it is, and you didn't see it coming. At the time. He does so much with so little, and I love them both honestly. But I think I have more of an affection for Jamie Foxx's performance because it was such a shocking out of nowhere. Yeah, man, that's a great pick. Okay, my turn. So this is really funny. I'm also going to go with the Cruise movie for my number one choice, and this is definitely. Like you said, I'm glad we're not competitive with each other because you could probably call me out on this. But I'm going Minority Report, which you could probably say, like, dude, that's a sci-fi movie. But it is very action-oriented. I think I've said on here before, I think when we, again, going back to our very first episode, The Mission Impossible, we talked about our cruise. And I listed that as one of my favorite cruise movies. And I said that then, I'll say it now. In a lot of ways, I feel like it's the forgotten movie. And it's Cruise and Spielberg, which is crazy. But I saw it in the theater. I've always loved that movie. I think it's unbelievable. It's got some of the most unique, just visually, which is no surprise because it's Spielberg. But I'm thinking of specifically, there's that scene where they've got like the robotic spiders and they scan people's eyes, and those spiders are going through I think it's like an apartment, and it's overhead, like looking down at all the different rooms of this apartment. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that movie. Like I said it when you brought it up in our first podcast, and I still haven't gotten back around to rewatching it. You're right. It's kind of forgotten. It doesn't get mentioned very often.
It's really weird. It was a hit. It was well reviewed, and it's Cruise and Spielberg, two of the most famous people in Hollywood. And it's again, and I know it's a lot of sci-fi. It's really leaning into the sci-fi, futuristic, but it is. Chase and Cruise is on the run, and there's some mystery. You don't understand why. I know we do spoilers on here, but I do want to leave it up to people if they haven't seen it to go watch it. But Cruise is accused of committing a crime that the audience knows he didn't commit, but you have to figure out how it made it look like he did commit it. And I'm probably doing a really bad job of explaining it, but there's just a lot of mystery around it.
It's like a predictor of crimes,
yes.
Right? And so the thing says, you're going to commit a crime. And he's like, no, I'm not.
No, I'm not.
It's suddenly, he was the guy who chased down the people who were going to commit.
It's really smart. It's visually unbelievable. And there's a scene, I'll describe it a little bit, but I want to leave it, if you haven't seen the movie, to go watch it, where Cruise has got someone, he's kind of carrying someone along, and she actually can see the future. And so she's telling him, go to the right. And the way Spielberg does it, it's just incredible. It's visually amazing. It's a fun movie. It's a neat, how they do this. And I just have always, any chance to talk about it, I do, because it's just weird how many people don't know that movie or haven't seen that movie.
Yeah, it's a good pick. And you know what? I wouldn't fight you on it. I think that's a solid action pick.
Thank you. So Cruise taking the top spot for both. Once again proving that Tom Cruise just can't lose.
That's true, man. Wow, didn't realize what an action movie run that was for him. Obviously, he really hits his action movie stride when we do the.
I'm saying this is before we even get into the later Mission Impossible era.
Right. All right. So number 2 for me. And again, I'm maybe going a little more heart than head here. Because I just love this movie so much, and again, not even so much action in it, but I think it's enough to be considered an action movie. Is The Book of Eli, starring Denzel Washington.
Yep.
Because I think the action that is in it is really cool.
Oh yeah.
Really well choreographed, and he's one of those really. Oh gosh, we're in the church. How to say this? Really BA characters.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Say it. Really BA characters. You watch this dude's so cool.
And you just buy it.
Yeah.
You're just yep, toughest guy I've ever met in my life.
Yeah. And then I just enjoyed the movie as a whole.
It's a cool movie. Good
movie. Good Gary Oldman performance. He's always solid.
Gary Oldman's always good.
Yeah. Shockingly, I remember when the movie came out, I felt like Mila Kunis was really out of place casting it. But then when I watched the movie, I'm like,
she's good.
She just blends right in and actually works.
Yep.
So yeah, Book of Eli, that's my pick.
And it has a twist in it.
It does, and it's kind of hard. I've kind of been avoiding talking about that twist. It's obviously it's from the aughts. It's long enough that we shouldn't have to say spoiler or anything. But right. I still, because I think it's underseen and I want people to watch it.
Exactly. That's how I feel about Minority Report.
Go watch Book of Eli.
There's a twist.
Yeah, everybody I've shown it to is that's a really good movie. How come I've never heard of that? It's it just, for whatever reason, it came out the same year as I Am Legend.
Yeah.
And I think I Am Legend kind of got more shine. I think Book of Eli was a better movie.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that completely.
Yeah.
And you just get used to all Denzel movies are good. And so sometimes you just go, yeah, it was another good Denzel movie. And then you just kind of move on.
I was amazed on a Ringer podcast. I think it was a Big Picture podcast. They did a Denzel movie draft.
How many good movies he's been in?
They didn't even draft the Book of Eli, and I'm that's amazing because it's one of my favorite Denzel performances. But there was just so many other good Denzel movies for them to draft it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 2 pick. I said earlier I had a Tarantino movie on here. I'm going Kill Bill, Volume 1. Okay, so I know one day on this pod we'll probably do a whole Tarantino episode, I'm sure. I was so excited for that movie. It had been a long time since Jackie Brown, which was his previous movie. And it was like, you know, Tarantino was pretty open at the time. Like, I'm making a kung fu revenge, like, exploitation. Like, he was very open about all these genres he was stealing from. I mean, he had no problem admitting that, or borrowing from, I guess. And so it was like, whoa, like, Tarantino's going to take these old, like, kung fu, grindhouse, revenge movies and make his own version of it. I was so hyped for that movie, and it doesn't disappoint. The last, like, 40 minutes of that movie is just a giant sword fight with Uma Thurman's character and all these ninjas. Crazy 88. And there actually is, I think, 88 of them. And it's just an unbelievable action movie, and it's weird. And it's got all, like, I think you and I have talked about this off camera before, where, like, Tarantino just using all the tricks in Kill Bill. Slow-mo, black and white, chapters, freeze frame, non-linear, you name it, he does it, and it just works for me. It's always been one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Bizarrely enough, Kill Bill Volume 1 was the first Tarantino movie that I saw.
Oh, that's crazy.
Which is crazy. Like, and it was so different.
It's weird.
Like, and I remember I watched it in college. I was a freshman. There was a senior that I was friends with, and he's like, so excited Kill Bill came out. He's like, you got to watch this movie with me. I'm so excited for it. I'm
in
like,
the
okay,
theater?
No. We
okay, at home.
On video. We watched it in the dorm room. And I watched it, and I was like, I don't know what I'm watching.
Yeah.
It's
wild.
And he was a Tarantino fan, and he ended up, like, introducing me to more Tarantino. I think the next I saw Reservoir Dogs and Jackie Brown. I actually didn't see Pulp Fiction until later than, like, all of those. And I became a Tarantino fan, but
it takes a minute.
I think of all his movies, Kill Bill is the most
Tarantino.
It's the most something, the most, just the most.
It's the most. It's not subtle.
Yeah,
there's no subtlety involved,
and it's definitely not where I would tell anybody else to begin if they're embarking on a Tarantino journey. But yeah, you're right. It's got a lot of action.
It's got a lot of action. So I actually think Kill Bill 2 is a better movie.
I do too.
I think it's a better movie, but it's honestly very little action in Kill Bill 2.
Right.
It has that amazing scene with Daryl Hannah and Uma Thurman in the trailer.
Yeah.
But one is kind of the action. 2 is kind of the brains, and it fills in a lot of the gaps.
And honestly, 2, you can't have 2 without 1. Like, you need the buildup of 1 for 2 to work the way that it does.
But if you're just going action, Kill Bill, and then you just, like I said, in the meantime, you get just Tarantino being Tarantino. Like they in the sword fight with the bride and the Crazy 88, it just halfway through just switches to black and white for no reason. I think maybe he may have been done to cut back on the blood and like not. Yeah. Maybe I don't know. I think I remember reading that.
Yeah.
And like when they say Uma Thurman's character's name in the movie, they bleep it for no reason. Just because Tarantino's a weirdo.
Yeah.
And so it's just always been one of my favorites. But if you like action movies, and even if you don't like, Tarantino is definitely not everybody's cup of tea. His stuff is, his movies are a lot, like you said, and they're vulgar and they're all these things. But if you just like action, watch that ending sword fight. It's incredible. And it goes on for a really long time.
Yeah, I remember Uma Thurman saying if she had known how hard it was going to be to film that, when she's like, I don't know if I would have signed up.
Oh my gosh. It's a shame that movies like that don't get Oscar love, because I honestly think Uma Thurman could have been nominated for an Oscar for either one of those movies. I'm
trying to remember, because Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 is it's a unique thing because he views it as one film. Mm-hmm. It came out separately. Do you remember how much time was between the releases of the two?
I do. Kill Bill 1 came out in October 2003. Volume 2 came out April 2004. So 6 months-ish.
And again, I didn't track the Academy as much then as I do even like now. Mm-hmm. I know obviously the Academy, they love Tarantino now. I don't think they did as much then, but like, neither one of those movies got any nominations. Right. I don't think anything. I do wonder like if they had been both on the same like Oscar year, if it would have helped, or if it was released as considered kind of one, even if it was in 2 parts. I don't know, but
I'm not saying
it also just might be the most, like I said, it's not the most accessible Tarantino. So
it's not, and I'm not saying Uma Thurman should have won, but I mean, who worked harder for a movie than she did? I mean, she's just unbelievable in that movie.
Yeah,
so it's always been a personal favorite.
All right, number 3 for me. I really feel like I'm all over the place genre-wise.
Oh, I am
because,
too.
Again, you just kind of have to be. So now I'm going sword and sandal epic. I'm going with Troy.
Yeah.
Starring Brad Pitt, Eric Bana. It's obviously the telling of the Trojan War. Yep. I really dig this movie because of a number of things. One, I think it's got really cool action in it.
Yeah.
That's first and foremost. In an action movie draft, Brad Pitt's character of Achilles is really awesome. He's got one of the great opening fights where the buildup looks like, oh man, he's going to take on this giant guy. This is going to be a big epic fight. And no, he just like dispatches of him immediately. Oh, yeah. But then it's just, to me, it's a telling of the Iliad, which I've never read.
Right.
But I know the Iliad's done with like a lot of, the gods are characters and interfere in things. And it's supernatural. And they're like, what if this was a real story, but it was just real?
Yeah.
So real people, and like this is how it kind of back and forths. And like Brad Pitt's the main character, but actually you end up not rooting for him. You end up rooting for Eric Bana's character because he's sort of the more regular good guy.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm compelled every time I watch it. Like,
it's a good movie. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, I think it. I don't know why it didn't get a lot of love when it came out.
No. And I think it was one of those, if I recall, I think it was, there was a lot of hype to it. It was like, oh, look out, Oscars, here comes Brad Pitt's Troy.
Yeah.
And then it just didn't work out that way for him.
I honestly think in a lot of ways, probably because it isn't very traditionally structured. Like, it's not like good guys, bad guys. It's kind of like there's good guys and bad guys on both sides. Yeah. They're just fighting. Yeah. Here's what happens. I also think there was still this like Gladiator hangover where people felt like everyone's just trying to make the next Gladiator, and it kind of got lumped in.
That's a great point.
I actually I prefer it to Gladiator.
Do you?
That might be a hot take for me, but also like if we ever do a hot takes episode, it's gonna be on there that like I don't really like Gladiator. So but I do think it kind of got that there was this hangover of like there was Kingdom of Heaven, there was all sorts of movies. It just felt like people kept trying to replicate Gladiator, and Troy was just kind of like by the time it came out, people were like,
what is Troy? Is it like 2004, 2005, somewhere
I think so.
There? I think it is.
2004 sounds right.
It does seem like, too, in the 2000s, they really, I guess maybe the special effects caught up, and they really seemed like Hollywood figured out how to do the big battles. So I wonder, too, if even earlier in the 2000s, if people were like, okay, like, because then all of a sudden a lot of movies start, Lord of the Rings is going on during that time, which I also left off my list.
I did too.
And so all of a sudden just the big battles with thousands of people involved. I wonder if that, I don't know. I wonder, just speculating if maybe people were already like, okay, we're seeing this a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that was.
You're right though, and it's funny how we've already talked about a couple movies on here that we both have felt like are kind of forgotten or overlooked movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Pitt's always good.
I love Pitt.
Number 3 for me. So I'm going to go with, kind of like we talked about in the 80s and 90s. I think there's certain representation you need. And I like my guy Matt Damon. And so I'm going to go with the Bourne Supremacy, actually. I'm going to go with the second one, which I did when we did was it the 80s or 90s? I did the second Lethal Weapon.
You did, yeah.
Because I think sometimes with these action movies, I think the second one in a series of movies has the advantage of the first one has to do the setup, and you have to learn a little bit about the characters and why they're action heroes and stuff. And then when the second one rolls around, we're just off and running. And I like the first Bourne movie, but in the second one, it's like we know the story already. We're just going to let this cook. And Matt Damon, I think, is even better in the second one than he is in the first one. He had the first one to kind of figure out, I don't know, we got a really obnoxious fly. Yeah. He was over here earlier. And it's just really good. And, that was kind of I don't want to say it was the introduction of like the realistic kind of like fighting and action, but it's definitely completely different than like the Schwarzenegger, Stallone kind of fighting, where I mean, number one, Damon kind of just looks more like a everyman.
Yeah, it was kind of a shock that Matt Damon was being an action hero in a movie.
Yeah, but then you watch it and you're like, oh, he's really good at this. And he would the Bourne movies are the first movies I remember where it was like the action hero would just find like random objects and use them like as a weapon in the fight he was in.
Yeah,
and that kind of felt cool and original at the time. And it was, it wasn't even really shot like an action movie, so to speak. It was shot almost like a realistic type of feel to it, even though there's these crazy things going on.
Well, in my big beef with the Bourne movies, I think I did have Bourne Identity on my list.
Yeah.
But it popularized the shaky cam action.
Yes,
and
that's a fair point.
And I don't love the shaky cam action in the Bourne movies, but at least it was original in the Bourne movies. And then it spawned so many shaky cam action sequences in the movies. And
you get sick of it pretty quick.
I love shaky cam.
Yeah. I just always have, and I think sometimes it's just the age you are, and when these movies first started coming out, I was kind of a young adult, and then these felt more like action movies for young adults, if that makes sense. And
they feel like smart action.
They had a little bit of an intelligence to them, and we talked about this in the '90s, and it carried on a little bit where they started getting better actors to be in the action movies, and Damon, I think, is a good actor. And any of the Bourne movies you watch, they fill them with a lot of good, like Joan Allen's really good in the Bourne Supremacy.
Yeah.
There's just Julia Stiles. She has a really good scene where he takes her into the subway and he's got a gun pointed at her, and she's doing some really good acting. And so I just wanted to put on there because it's like the smart action and that more realistic style of action I did like. But yes, you are correct. It then ran into the ground pretty quickly.
Yeah. All right. For my next pick.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of smart action, in this one again, this was one where I really felt like maybe I'm pushing the boundaries of action because there's almost no typical action in it, but it feels like an action movie to me. That's Inside Man.
Yeah.
It's a heist movie. It's a bank robber movie.
Yep.
There's guns all in it. It's got the tempo and the energy of an action movie, even though there's only one fake death in it.
Yeah.
In the whole movie.
Yep.
But I love this movie.
It's a good movie.
It's my favorite, probably, bank heist movie.
Nope.
I guess it's hard to say because I guess, I could argue like Heat or something like that is a bank heist movie, but I don't know. I think of that more as a cops
this is
movie.
Literally inside of a bank.
This is yes, hostages in a bank heist movie. It's my again, Denzel's always great. He's probably my favorite. Clive Owen.
Clive Owen is good in this movie,
and this is one of the earliest films I remember him being in. And I remember thinking this dude's going to be a huge star.
Yeah.
And it felt like for a little bit there,
he had a window there, and then it just kind of never happened.
It's like he had a bunch of movies that didn't hit, and it just kind of went away.
It's too bad because he's good.
Yeah, he's really good in this, and Jodie Foster shows up in it. She's good.
Yep.
Just a lot of it's just a very clever bank heist movie, and probably my favorite Spike Lee movie. And I don't say that as someone who's dislikes Spike Lee's other works. I like a lot of Spike Lee movies, but I think that we talked about this before. He didn't write this movie. He kind of came on late, and he was like, I'm just going to direct and focus on being an awesome director. Yeah. And he wasn't too close to it, and he just directed an awesome movie.
Well, and a lot of Spike Lee's movies are very weighty, and they're about race and a lot of, and not that's great. Yeah. He's made some great movies, but this one it was like you didn't have to worry about that carrying that weight around with you of man, this is a heavy movie.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of stuff about race in Inside Man that's important. It's more about cultural blending. New York's a very important setting for the story because it's people from all these different backgrounds and languages comes into play, people speaking different languages and things like that. And Spike, I think, because he's from New York and is deeply aware of race stuff there, he was perfect to direct it and be hey, it's not all about race and racism, but it's going to play a part.
It's going to play a part. It didn't feel like that was the driving force of the movie.
Right.
It also does a couple cool things that I love. Number one, I would call it almost like cat and mouse or like a chess match maybe.
Yes, it's very much.
That's always entertaining. And then kind of combining with the chess match, just smart people. In the movie, the criminals are smart. Jodie Foster's smart. You know, and so it's just like that battle of wits almost in an action movie, which is always really fun.
Yeah. Again, another one that I don't feel like enough people have seen. I want to encourage people, like, you haven't seen Inside Man.
That's really weird how that's becoming like the theme of this draft.
Yeah.
Okay. It's getting to the point where I know I'm going to have to leave a couple out that I don't want to leave out. Were you done, by the way? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, you're up.
So this one, I'm just kind of going with my heart on this one. And this is another Denzel, Man on Fire.
On my list.
Yeah, I thought maybe it would be. So, and I should have done my research a little bit. I wonder if this is the first time, I guess it's probably not, where Denzel was just like, you know what? I'm kind of awesome and I could just be a really cool action star. It feels like maybe this is the most he leaned into that.
Yeah.
Because before that, there was always still a little bit of like, he still wanted that prestige. And I think in this movie, I don't think he thought he was going to win an Oscar or anything. And it was just like, you know what? Just action. And to steal from you, like you were saying earlier, like, BA. Like, Denzel, way to go, man. Like, you are intimidating and you look tough and you're playing the part.
Yeah. And the dude just has one of the greatest voices. Like,
yes.
He just seems so, like
intelligent but serious. And
one of my biggest fascinations is actors in Hollywood who just always appear smart. I'm always like, I want to know, are they really smart in real life?
Or do they just know how to sound?
Do they just have the right look and sound?
Yeah.
And Denzel is one of those guys, like, I definitely don't think he's dumb by any means. But
no.
like, Denzel, if you told me that, like, you were, you know, an A student all growing up and, like, could have gone to Harvard.
Went to an Ivy League school,
Like, I'd believe it. But I think it actually wasn't that. I think he was, like, I've heard some of him giving his story before, and like he was struggling like out of high school and stuff.
Interesting.
But I think he is still a smart guy, obviously. But it's just like you can play smart so well.
Oh yeah.
And like the other thing is he plays disciplined really well.
Yes.
And you're like, I wonder in real life, like, wouldn't it be hilarious to find out that Denzel Washington's just kind of like slobby, he's always late, he's not really like, because
his house is just in disarray.
Because, I mean, you look through his filmography and it's like, Man on Fire, he plays the super, like, disciplined, like, ex-soldier who's on top of things. Even the movie that I don't like that we talked about before, Remember the Titans, as a coach, he's that, I'm that super disciplined, straight, you know, like, he's so good at, I am disciplined and I am direct and
it also just has the great thing, like what you're saying, like his voice, where when he calls the bad guys, you know, it's like, hey, I'm coming to get this girl and you will pay, or what, you know, it's like, yes. Like, you just believe everything he says, and you're like, that's exactly what he's going to do. Like, he just has that voice, and, you know, this movie is not breaking any new ground or anything like that, but you just are like, awesome. Denzel's awesome. I love watching Denzel Washington just beat the crap out of the bad guys and just go on a revenge, you know, it's great.
Yeah, it really is wild, kind of, it feels like a precursor. It's not related to the Equalizer series, but it really feels
it's
like...
in the same family, though, it feels like.
It feels like, they were like, hey, you know you did that Man on Fire movie. What if we kind of kept doing that?
Yeah, because so Man on Fire came first.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then Equalizers?
Like pretty... Yeah, first Equalizer, I think, was like 2014.
Okay, so, way before that then. Yeah.
So, it's a good one.
It is.
Man, this is always the toughest when you get down to your last pick.
I know.
Because...
Five picks goes by really quick.
It does, and especially like usually your first couple, you feel strong enough about. You're like, those have to be in. But by 5, you're like, there's 20 movies, and I feel about the same about all of them.
Yep.
So which one am I going to pick? Oh shoot, I accidentally marked out the wrong one. All right, so this one I'm definitely going with my heart and over my head.
Okay, I like when you do that because you're smart. So I like when you go with your heart instead of your brain.
because this one's definitely not going for the smartest movie made. And man, I'm leaving a lot of good ones on here. But I just have to admit that I love this movie regardless of all its faults and flaws. And that's Gone in 60 Seconds with Nicolas Cage. I admit it. I love this movie. To me, it is just.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It is so much fun.
It is.
It is like, I don't even know how to describe. Like, it feels like of all the movies we've talked about, it still contains some of that like 80s action movies, like
yes,
fun,
that's a
cheesy,
great way to describe
like,
it. Mm-hmm.
It's like they contained a little bit of that. Of course, it is a remake, and I've never seen the original because it looked like, you know, it's one of the remakes where I go like, yeah, I think they were due for a remake because I've just seen like pictures from the original and this guy's in like afros and
it looks really dated,
and afros and dated and old clothes but it's just so much fun. Cage being kind of crazy Cage, but before he's like full off the rails.
He hasn't
Cage.
like completely jumped the shark yet.
Exactly.
It's also got just the most amazing thing where he's like psyching himself up, and I'm not even going to try and do it, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly.
Oh
they
my
play
gosh.
Lowrider, and he just does his little let's ride.
Like, let's go or let's ride. Yep, it's so funny.
Yeah, it's loaded cast and good car chase sequences. It's just the action element of it, and
it might be like the most 2000s movie that feels like a 90s movie.
Yeah,
and I do think it is early 2000s.
Yeah,
like I don't remember. Is it 2000? It's pretty early.
Maybe 2001.
Pretty early. Yeah. But it definitely feels rooted in those 90s action movies. Like it just feels like the next progression, like we talked about, where he did like The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, and then just right in and gone in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is extra funny too, because I know you and I share this. Like, we're not car guys.
No.
Couldn't care less about cars or fast cars or anything, but Nick Cage stealing fast cars because I don't even remember why. Did someone get kidnapped?
He was a car thief who got out of the business, and his younger brother followed
got
his footsteps
busted
and got in trouble. He took a big job and failed it, and so he had to come in and bail his brother out.
That's kind of too that like there was this great run where they would just come up with these premises for action movies, and even though they were goofy, it was like, but that's perfect for an action, like Speed, bomb on a bus.
Yeah.
Perfect. Gone in 60 seconds. You have to steal a bunch of cars. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an incredible choice, by the way. I'm really proud of you for that. I
appreciate the support because
no, you gravitate towards brainy, smart stuff. I'm always really proud of you when you're like, I love this Nick Cage movie where he steals cars.
Yeah.
All right. I'm like you. I'm having a really tough time because there's some that it's definitely gonna hurt my feelings. I did have Gone in 60 Seconds on my list. Okay. I think the last one I'm gonna pick because I got a little bit of. It's my last pick. Why not? I think this also goes with our theme of like a lesser seen movie. I'm gonna go V for Vendetta.
Okay.
It's a weird movie. I think it did get some recognition. Like kind of the mask from the movie became famous.
Yeah, Guy Fawkes.
Yeah,
I think Max.
Yeah,
Fawkes.
and this one might blur the lines a little bit. It's definitely not a traditional action movie. I was just trying to think in my mind how I would like what genre this is.
Yeah,
because there's like some
It's like
futuristic kind of No, futuristic doesn't sound right either.
No,
it's a weird one.
Yeah, I don't know how you place this movie.
Just watch it, but it's got some cool action. It's got Natalie Portman in it, who I think is kind of like a sneaky good action movie star. Like she's been in some movies where she's good, like in the action type of situation. Yeah, and I just feel like this is one that. People might know the mask or like some of the images, but maybe haven't watched the movie. And it's a good movie.
Yeah. It's one of the only movies that I can think of or remember where the lead actor commits to a role where you never get to see his face. Yeah. He's in the mask the entire time.
Yeah, and it's the dude,
the guy who plays Agent Smith.
Hugo Weaving is his name. Yeah. And he was he had a lot of momentum because of the Matrix and stuff. Yeah. And then for him to take on this role where you don't see his face, it's just an interesting movie. It's not, it's not in like my top 10 or anything, but I just was like, I was looking up movies. I was like, V for Vendetta, that's a good movie. And I just don't feel like there's a lot of conversation about it.
Yeah, you're right. Like I think it had a decent amount of attention when it came out.
Yeah, and I think it
did.
The
people who made The Matrix, wasn't it? I think the same people who
made
The Matrix.
I think you might be right.
Could be wrong, but I think so. But yeah, it definitely you don't hear anything about it.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of fallen out of the consciousness of moviegoers or movie fans.
Yeah, I mean, but it's another smart one.
Yep.
I remember him doing this. He does a whole little like monologue to Natalie Portman's character, where every word he uses like starts with a V. Yeah. And I just remember hearing that and going like, that must have been a pain to write, but what impressive.
Like
that
it sounds
like it
cool.
Just, he just ran through this.
Yeah, and it does kind of have that thing going for it where, like we were talking about with Denzel, where he sounds smart and like
he is a voice guy.
And the movie itself, like you're like, okay, this is an action movie, but it feels like it's trying to tell me something bigger or about something bigger than just which is a big difference from the 80s movies where you go, Commando is not trying to it's not trying to tell me anything about anything. And so it's just always a movie I've liked, and I thought probably never get much of a chance to talk about V for Vendetta again. So I wanted to put it on my list.
Man, you saying that about Commando just made me realize like that would be a really funny podcast gimmick. Maybe not for us, but for somebody to be like, take movies like Commando and explain them like they're prestige movies.
What they're so what you don't know is that actually Commando represents or like Cobra. So Cobra he represents and just
it's a lot of commentary on the state of the that would be hilarious.
And just do it and make it sound like you know exactly what you're talking about, but you're really just making stuff up.
Yeah. That would be so funny.
It would.
Right. So we both got our 5. Let's run through some movies that we left off of our list because first of all, I wanted to mention another one that I looked at, and when I Googled it, actually came up on one of the lists I saw of action movies, and I was like, I just don't consider it an action movie. If I did, it would definitely deserve to be on the list. It's No Country for Old Men.
Yes.
Which has got some great, what I would call suspense scenes. It does have some action. I mean, there's shooting, shootouts, violence, but it's like great cat and mouse action for so long. But it's just, ultimately, I was like, I still just don't categorize it like action because whatever it is, this sort of dark drama.
Yeah, dark drama. That's a really good way to put it.
But if I felt comfortable categorizing it as action, it should have been in.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Because
I'll tell you what it does make me think though is that the Coen brothers should direct an action movie.
Yeah.
Because the little bit, like there's that scene where they're like downtown in the middle of the night.
Yes.
Javier Bardem and Josh Brolin. Some of the most thrilling action I've ever seen.
It is.
I mean, I know it's a cliche to say like edge of your seat, but edge of your seat, like unbelievable.
Yeah, the tension in those scenes is incredible.
That's an incredible movie.
So that's one that like
same. I saw that and I was like, I can't. I almost feel like it's like a slap in the face to that movie to just be like, yeah, it's an action movie. Yeah, so much more than that.
So I wanted to mention a couple movies that I thought were really influential that we didn't take. One of them, Taken.
Yes, it's on my list.
Very influential action movie. I think, in hindsight, the success of that movie, obviously, it's got the most iconic scene is the daughter being taken and him on the phone.
Yep.
And
a very unique set of skills.
with the voice that when he talks, you believe. Yeah. But I think, in hindsight, we could go like, that's a movie that said, we're going to kind of tap back into that 80s action style.
That's straight out of the
people
80s.
Were so hungry for it because it had been like lacking for so long.
It was a huge hit.
That it hit. Then there was
they just ran it to the ground.
And rip-offs.
And Liam Neeson to this day is still just doing like direct-to-video Taken rip-offs.
And now I think that we've got the John Wick movies and things like that. Like Taken has completely just been pushed by the wayside. It's like, thanks for doing what you did when you did.
See you later.
You kind of helped revive action movies a little bit, but we don't need you anymore.
I 100% agree with you, and that's why it didn't make my top 5. Because it just felt like it really quickly became, like exactly like you said, hey, appreciate it, now get out of the way. Here comes John Wick.
Yeah. And then another one, very influential for better or worse, 300.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder's comic book adaptation.
That movie's just too much for me.
It is. It
looks cool. I will say that. It's got a unique look to it.
It does. It's a movie I don't revisit ever.
No.
I will say this. If we ever do like a podcast on our favorite movie previews ever, it's going to get a shout out because I think that movie was made to
for
be
a trailer.
It was made for a trailer.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't always make sense as a whole movie.
Nope.
But in fact, I think we've talked about before, if you like play it all at regular speed, it's not even a full-length movie.
Yeah, right.
Because there's so many like slow-mo spins.
It'd be like 17 minutes long.
Yeah. But it was so impactful, I just feel like you got to mention it. And Yeah, it was a big
It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah. So those are the two that I thought were like so impactful. We got to mention.
Oh yeah.
Some other ones that were just ones that I considered. District 9
on my list. Really good movie.
Really good movie, and honestly, like, oh man, I almost just wanted to pick it. Talk about another one. Underseen. People see District 9.
Gosh.
Great movie.
It is a great movie.
Such a unique storytelling style too. This like mockumentary sci-fi action.
It's really cool.
I've never seen anything like
Check
that.
it out if you haven't seen it.
Yep.
That's kind of where I landed. Was it almost felt too sci-fi for me?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I threw on Bad Boys 2 on the list just for fun.
Yeah.
Hunted. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Tommy Lee Jones, Benicio del Toro.
Yep.
Kind of a small movie, but like
I know
it's one of those ones that like is a. This doesn't really apply anymore, but kind of cable rewatchable one for me. Like if I come across it, like
you're gonna watch it.
Watch it.
You know it's not the greatest movie, but it's
310 to Yuma.
Had it on my list.
That's
Big
a
fan.
really solid one.
Yep.
The Patriot.
Yeah,
Mel Gibson.
Some good action in that movie.
I do like that movie. It's one that like I loved when it came out. My love for it has waned over the years to the point where now like it's not. I like had to write it, but didn't really
never considered it for your top 5.
Yeah, one that was I never really considered for my list, but I just wanted to give it a shout out because I think it's better than even its reputation, which is not great, is Resident Evil. The first Resident Evil movie I thought was fun.
Yeah.
It's got the great scene of the guys in the hallway and the lasers that come down.
Oh my gosh.
Surprising net laser. It's like, you just can't get out of this.
No, it's the unwinnable situation.
It's not a good movie. I'm definitely not saying that, but it just, I want to give it props for
Sure. And then there's like 7 of those or 8 of them or something ridiculous. I lost track.
Yeah, and none of them are great, but to me, the Resident Evil movies kind of feel like, well, we talk about like the Halloween movies, but like Halloween like 4 through 7 or something like that. Like, okay, they're not great movies, but like they know what they are.
They know what they are,
and they're just trying to be fun with that. And I kind of dig them. And then the last one that I wanted to shout out is Snatch.
Oh yeah,
Brad Pitt, which is I love as much as any of the movies I put on here, but feels almost more like action comedy. Like it doesn't feel like straight action. It's just this kinetic, crazy.
Oh yeah, that's a wild movie.
Movement, you know, like movie. So, but man, it's got a great Brad Pitt character in it.
Oh my gosh,
Brad
Pitt's just good.
I love Brad Pitt.
He is good. I know that's kind of stating the obvious, but
yeah. You have some other.
I had a few. So I'm gonna circle back to something you said earlier. So I had Gladiator on my list, but I agree with you. So I think Gladiator is fine as just an action movie. I think it's so weird that movie won like Best Picture.
Yeah,
that is not the Best Picture of that year. But it's weird because I think if people would have just been like, "Hey, this is a cool action movie," and Russell Crowe's pretty good in it, I'd have been like, "Yeah, I agree." It won Oscars. Russell Crowe won an Oscar, I think.
I think you're right.
I think he did. I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah. And then, because he won for Gladiator, but didn't win for A Beautiful Mind, I think. And I'm like, it should have been the complete opposite. So I think if you, I can watch Gladiator and be like, oh, this is a cool action movie. And, Joaquin Phoenix is great as the, despicable, creepy villain. But it's so weird to me that was like an Oscar winner.
Yeah.
So if you just look at it as an action movie, I like it. I don't like looking at it as Academy Award winner Gladiator, if that makes any sense.
It has shaky cam action. That's what gets me about it.
It does. And I actually haven't watched it in a while. Yeah. I'm sure some of the animals is CGI and that probably maybe looks dated. And
this is my weird relationship to Gladiator though. It's a movie that I saw in theaters, opening weekend. Mm-hmm. My brother and I went to go see it. I was so excited to see it. Yeah. And I got out of the theater, and I was just feeling really bummed out because, I went in wanting to love it so bad. Yeah. And I was like, I didn't really love that. And then, it got so much love. I was like, why is everybody loving it? I don't see it.
It's weird.
And then it kind of made me dislike it more than I should. And then it's every couple of years I'd be like, I'm probably giving it an unfair shake. I need to go back and watch it. I bet I'll enjoy it. And I rewatch it and be like, I still don't. Yeah. And even to this day, I still think about it, I'm like, should I rewatch it again? And I'm like, no, I've given it several shots. Yeah. And it just has never quite hit me the way it did other people, and I just got to accept that.
Yeah. And it's a weird one because I saw it and I was like, oh, that was a really cool movie. And then I think it came out in the summer, and then down the road, come Oscar season, I was like, wait, what? Like, why is everyone talking about Gladiator winning an Oscar? And so I liked it first as an action movie. I think it's weird that it got all the Oscar love. Let's see. I had District 9. I had I Am Legend. I think you brought that up earlier. Yeah. Not my favorite movie, but it's a good movie. Taken was on my list. I had Mr. and Mrs. Smith on my list.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. It's one of those movies I think like the Brad Angelina romance came out of that movie, and then people forget about the actual movie.
Right.
But if you go watch it, it's just the two of them, and they're having a lot of fun. And
it is a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I think Vince Vaughn is in it, kind of he's like in a comedic role, and I just don't feel like anyone ever talks about that movie. I wanted to put something I've always liked, which is weird because I a lot of times don't like remakes. The Star Trek reboot, J.J. Abrams, that came out in the 2000s. Yeah. I always liked it, but ultimately that just felt like too much sci-fi. I had 3:10 to Yuma. I had Gone in 60 Seconds. I did have National Treasure.
Okay.
Another Nick Cage, just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, kind of spawned the famous, like, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence and all that. I don't know how much I believe this, but I did write Mission Impossible 3 on my list because Philip Seymour Hoffman's really good as the bad guy.
Yeah.
So that was really it. Like I said, I don't remember if I said this on camera before, but I had a long list of 2000s action movies that I really, really dislike.
All right, I'm going to need to hear some of them. I'm actually maybe more excited about this list.
And what it is it's all these franchises. So number one, the 2000s gives birth to the Fast and Furious franchise, which has become super, mega, ultra popular, and they just released the 10th one. I just don't get it. And it's not because, I've said this before, it's not because I'm too intelligent for those or I'm too much of a movie guy to watch. No, I love Commando. I love Cobra. I love Die Hard. I just don't get the Fast and Furious. I don't get the popularity of it. I mean, good for them, I guess, if they can make really successful movies based off driving cars, but I've just never gotten it.
Yeah.
How about you?
I've never been a Fast and Furious guy. The first one, it's okay. It's
fine,
watchable. Yeah. It's Point Break, though, and it doesn't need to exist because Point Break already existed.
Exactly.
And then, it just... I was actually talking to somebody, one of our mutual friends, Jeremy Rhodes, about this earlier, that if I had a time machine, among all the silly, trivial things I'd want to do with a time machine is go back in time and show somebody who just watched the first Fast and Furious and be like, okay, I want you to watch the 7th installment, and have them be like, how? How did they get from here to here?
It's got to be the all-time weirdest franchise.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's one of them. Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah,
was born in the 2000s. I don't like those. I just don't. They're just. I don't like these movies that are like you can just see the money dripping off the screen. Where they're like, here's $400 million, and so it looks good and there's explosions. But they were so busy spending their $400 million, they forgot to make a plot for the movie.
Yeah.
And by the time you're watching Pirates of the Caribbean 4, you're like, what? I don't even know what's happening anymore.
I think maybe we've discussed this before on here, so I'm sorry if I'm just repeating myself, but I still think if they just had stopped at 1, I think I'd still like it and respect it.
It's fun.
But they just drained the life out of it.
Oh my gosh, they sucked the life out of those.
I've just brushed aside the whole franchise.
Me too. They sucked the life out of those so quickly. Yeah, I mean, when the first one came out, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they made a movie out of a Disney ride. And Johnny Depp,
a really fun Johnny Depp performance.
Kudos to him. He literally got nominated for an Oscar for playing Jack Sparrow, and then they just immediately. And then to my next point, Transformers. Those movies just give me a headache. I do not like those movies at all. We talked about this in our 90s action movie draft where Michael Bay was making these, they were these big bloated action movies, but they were fun. Yeah. And then he decided I'm only going to make Transformers movies from now on. And those movies drive me crazy.
Yeah, I feel like you can kind of summarize Michael Bay's 2000s with the meme from Jurassic Park. You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't
stop anything that you should. Yeah.
And that was him. He's just like so obsessed with what he could do with the filmmaking and creating these things that it never stopped. He was like, but why?
Why? What are you doing? And it's the same thing where it's like you can tell they spent $500 million, but I couldn't explain the plot of one of those movies if I had to. And I always hated, for some reason, that one was called Dark of the Moon. That just drove me nuts. Transformers Dark of the Moon. That's a terrible title. I hate that. Sorry. That just brought up some repressed anger I had about Dark of the Moon. And then another thing you saw in the 2000s where they were trying to carry over successful action movies from the 80s and 90s. You got some bad Die Hard sequels, like Live Free or Die Hard.
Yeah, which wasn't even written as a Die Hard movie. Yeah. But they were like, I think we could sell it if we made this main guy John McClane from Die Hard.
They did the same thing. They made some bad Terminator movies in the 2000s. They tried to continue like The Mummy, like with the Brendan Fraser from the 90s, The Mummy, which was kind of fun. And then they just immediately sucked the life out of it. And then something we've talked about on here before, there was a lot of Bond movies in the 2000s. Those just mean nothing to me.
Yeah.
There's 500 other movies I'd rather watch before Bond movies. So I actually started with stuff that I knew wasn't going to be on my list. And it was all those kind of things. And then, you know, we talked about before we started that we left, for the most part, left comic movies off. There was some good comic book movies in the 2000s. There were some bad ones. You were getting like Ghost Rider and stuff with Nick Cage. And the 2000s is one of the first times where I just remember thinking like, like the action movies might be in trouble because of stuff like I just listed here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you know, I'll say this. Like, when we did our 80s action movie draft, we kind of projected forward, like, if we keep doing this, like, it could get bleak. We can't do that. And I think we've illustrated that there is some bleakness in the aughts. But
there's some good stuff.
Pleasantly surprised. I think we've got 10 good movies here from our list that are good movies that I would still to this day encourage people to go watch.
Oh, definitely.
And say, I think you'll enjoy them. I think they're good movies. So it is nice to see, like, and I do think if we do the teens, there's going to be sufficient meat on the bone there.
I think so. I think
and even more so probably with some of the franchises that we've talked about before, loving.
Yeah.
But this I think was the sort of low point decade, and we still were able to
we were still able to find some good ones on here.
Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest thing to me is just like we said, there's still some on here, but we did start to lose just the straight action movie.
Yeah.
That's where we kind of go wrong. And then the real Hollywood type stuff takes over, where you get 4 or 5 Transformers movies, 4 or 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And that's when things, to me, started to get frustrating. We're like, this is not what I want. I don't want to see this.
Yeah. And I think, before we wrap up, we would be really letting down, I think, Bill Simmons and Chris Ryan if we didn't mention Miami Vice.
Yes. They love that movie.
They love that movie.
They do so much.
Bless them. That's their movie that, like, people aren't going to understand. I don't understand why they love it so much.
But that's a Michael Mann movie. I'll be honest with you. I don't understand a lot of Michael Mann movies.
Yeah.
He has, not like I literally don't understand it, but I don't see the appeal. His movies are, he's a strange filmmaker.
He is. I feel like when he hits, he really hits. Heat, Collateral, like 2 movies that I adore.
Love them both, yeah.
And then it's like everything else is like, ooh.
It's odd.
Yeah.
Like this is completely off topic, but that's okay. I was rewatching Manhunter the other day, which is his 80s movie. It's actually the first on-screen appearance of the Hannibal Lecter character. Talk about a weird movie. It's weird. Like, it's slow. Just his style of filmmaking is weird. But yeah, Bill Simmons and Chris Ryan, my favorite podcasters, they love that movie.
They do.
They do. Yeah, I don't get it.
I think listening to them talk excitedly about Miami Vice is 100 times more entertaining than Miami Vice.
Right?
Movie.
It's a mess.
It is.
It's a mess. Yeah.
That's one of those movies where you watch and go, well, there was behind the scenes trouble, wasn't there?
There was some, and I think they talked about it, where it was like, I don't think Colin Farrell was exactly in a great state of mind.
I think he remembers making that movie.
I'm sure that's a blur to him. Yeah, he was probably surprised to find out he was in that movie. But got your guy Jamie Foxx in it, trying his best, trying to carry that movie on his back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think
that was fun.
That was fun. Got our list successfully. I do want to recap. I realized after I did this at the end of our 80s
you didn't
draft,
recap.
I recapped. At the 90s one, I didn't, though.
Yeah.
I never went back and recapped. So, to recap, my 5 movies were at the number 1 spot, Collateral. Number 2, The Book of Eli. Number 3, Troy. Number 4, Inside Man. And number 5, Gone in 60 Seconds.
Yep.
Your 5 movies, number 1, Minority Report. Number 2, Kill Bill, Volume 1. Number 3, The Bourne Supremacy. Number 4, Man on Fire. Number 5, V for Vendetta.
It sounds incredible when you just named. Like, I remember when you did that for the 80s, and it was like, what an unbelievable 10 movies you just listed off.
Yeah. You know, I think over a 10-year period, you should be able to produce 10 good action movies.
Those are. I'm happy with those lists. Those are 2 good lists, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of variety. A few underappreciated movies we felt like on there.
Yeah, for sure.
And Cruise taking the number 1 spot for both of us.
That is amazing.
Cruise.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Cruise on both our lists. Denzel on both of our lists.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good stuff. All right, well, as always, audience, we'd love to hear from you.
Always.
If you've got a movie from this decade that you think we should have mentioned, that's one of your favorites, let us know, please. And then I'll say this too. If you've got a topic you'd like us to discuss sometime, let us know. We're open to it. We're oftentimes last minute just going, hey, what do you want to do today? And throwing it out there. So if you want to give us some ideas,
we'll do it probably.
Yeah, there's a good chance that we'll do it.
Yep.
But thank you guys for listening.
Always a treat.
And we'll see you guys next week.